The early morning light filtered through the towering windows of the Iverson estate, its rays catching the crystalline patterns on the marble floor, yet doing little to dispel the heavy mood that clung to the air. In a city where ambition and wealth reigned supreme, Alexander Iverson was known as a man who calculated every move with cold precision, a titan of industry whose fortune was built on shrewd deals and relentless determination. For him, life was a series of transactions, each emotion neatly boxed and accounted for, until the day he was forced to confront something he had long relegated to the shadows of his mind. Alexander had always prided himself on being impervious to sentimentality. To him, love was a variable to be measured, trust an asset to be managed, and marriage a contractual alliance, an arrangement as ordinary as any boardroom negotiation. His father, a formidable patriarch with a legacy of financial conquests, had orchestrated his union with Catherine Moreau, a woman whose very existence seemed to defy the formulas of his perfectly ordered life. Catherine, with her quiet grace and enigmatic aura, was introduced to him in a manner as calculated as any business proposal, a carefully staged event in an opulent hall where the air vibrated with the hushed hum of expectation. On that fateful day, Alexander's world had been meticulously planned. The grand cathedral, draped in white and gold, was filled with guests who exchanged smiles as practiced as stockbrokers negotiating a merger. Every detail, from the meticulously arranged floral displays to the synchronized footsteps of the ushers, was part of an intricate performance that left nothing to chance. Yet as the heavy oak doors swung open and Catherine stepped into the hall, draped in a gossamer veil that caught the light with every subtle movement, something in Alexander faltered. It was not merely her beauty, though that too was undeniable, but rather an ineffable quality that both drew him in and repelled him in equal measure. There was an aura about Catherine that was at once vulnerable and resolute. Her eyes, a deep and unsettling shade of hazel, held secrets that whispered of both past sorrows and untold defiance. When she moved, it was as if time itself hesitated, unwilling to disturb the delicate equilibrium of her presence. Alexander, who had spent his life dissecting the human psyche into cold, manageable parts, found himself disarmed by the mystery she embodied. In that single moment, as the veil of her hair fell away to reveal a face that was at once strikingly beautiful and etched with subtle hints of melancholy, he experienced a sensation he had long dismissed, a stirring of something profoundly human. Throughout the ceremony, Alexander's thoughts betrayed him. While the priest recited the customary vows with a monotony that should have soothed his analytical mind, his gaze was fixed on Catherine. Every measured step she took seemed to unravel the carefully constructed tapestry of his emotions, creating a dissonance he could neither comprehend nor ignore. The hushed murmurs of the congregation, the clink of fine china during the post-ceremony luncheon, even the subdued strains of a string quartet, all these faded into insignificance when compared to the intensity of the unspoken dialogue that had ignited between them. The reception was a lavish affair held in a grand ballroom adorned with cascading crystal chandeliers and walls draped in velvet. Alexander sat at a long table, his mind racing with conflicting thoughts. He had believed that his world was built solely on logic and control, that every relationship could be managed like a balance sheet. Yet here was Catherine, a woman whose mere presence disrupted the equilibrium of his carefully ordered existence. At first, he attempted to engage her with the detached politeness of a seasoned businessman. Their conversation was a series of guarded exchanges, polite remarks that barely concealed the tension simmering beneath the surface. Alexander tried to analyze her responses, to decipher the meaning behind the deliberate pauses and subtle shifts in her expression. But Catherine's words were like cryptic notes in an unfamiliar language. a language that hinted at a past filled with pain and triumph, mystery and resignation. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere shifted imperceptibly. The glittering lights of the ballroom cast long shadows on the faces of the guests, and Alexander felt a strange disquiet settle over him. It was as though the carefully constructed walls of his reality were beginning to crumble under the weight of something intangible. Catherine, too, seemed to be wrestling with an inner turmoil. When she excused herself for a moment and slipped away to a secluded balcony, Alexander followed at a distance. The cool night air was a welcome relief from the stifling grandeur of the party, and as he watched her stand alone against the backdrop of a starry sky, he sensed that she was wrestling with secrets that went far deeper than the superficial decorum of the evening. Her profile, outlined against the darkness, was a study in contrasts, delicate yet unyielding, as if every line of her face told a story of battles fought in silence. Alexander's rational mind urged him to retreat, to maintain the detachment he had cultivated over the years. Yet something compelled him to linger, to watch her as if trying to commit every nuance of her presence to memory. In that moment, the line between business and intimacy blurred, and he realized that for the first time in his life, he was drawn to something he couldn't quantify, a longing that defied calculation and reason. The encounter on the balcony was brief, a silent exchange in which words were superfluous. Catherine's eyes met his for a fleeting second, and in that glance, Alexander saw a vulnerability that was both heart-wrenching and achingly beautiful. It was as if she had silently acknowledged a truth he had long tried to ignore, that beneath the layers of his own carefully curated persona, there was a part of him that yearned for something genuine, something raw and unfiltered. But even as this realization dawned on him, a stubborn part of his nature recoiled at the idea of relinquishing control. To admit that he was affected by Catherine was to confront the possibility that his meticulously engineered life was built on a foundation as fragile as glass. Back inside the bustling warmth of the reception hall, the contrast between the glittering opulence and the storm brewing within him grew ever starker. Alexander's mind raced with questions that threatened to upend his well-ordered existence. Who was Catherine, truly? What secrets lay hidden behind those guarded eyes and that inscrutable smile? And most importantly, could he, who had always believed in the primacy of logic over emotion, allow himself to care about something that defied the rules of his world? As the night progressed, subtle signals began to emerge in their interactions. A casual brush of hands as they reached for the same glass of champagne, a half-smile exchanged across a crowded room, and those rare moments when Catherine's eyes softened, hinting at an inner life filled with unspoken stories. Alexander found himself increasingly distracted, his thoughts consumed by the enigma that was his new bride. His colleagues whispered that the union was purely strategic, a merger of two powerful families designed to cement an unassailable legacy in the world of finance and industry. Yet as Alexander sat there amidst the shimmering lights and hushed conversations, he sensed that the marriage was destined to be more than just a business arrangement. It was a collision of two souls, each bearing scars and secrets that would soon intertwine in unexpected ways. By the time the reception drew to a close, the initial euphoria of celebration had given way to a profound, almost palpable silence. Alexander retired to his private study, a sanctuary lined with dark wood and heavy leather-bound volumes, where he sought refuge in the familiar comfort of routine. But even here, the memory of Catherine's gaze lingered like an echo in the stillness, a reminder that some mysteries were not so easily tamed or contained. As he sat at his desk, staring at the empty space on the paper before him, Alexander's mind replayed every detail of the evening. Each moment, From the soft murmur of the vows to the final, lingering look exchanged in the corridors of the grand estate, resonated with a significance that belied their apparent ordinariness. In that solitude, a single thought crystallized. The woman he had just married was not the blank slate he had assumed her to be. Rather, she was a tapestry woven from threads of sorrow, resilience, and an almost imperceptible defiance. A defiance that challenged his very understanding of power and control. And so, as the night deepened and the estate settled into a hushed lull, Alexander Iverson resolved that he would uncover the truth behind Catherine's enigmatic facade, no matter the cost. The journey he was about to embark upon promised to be as unpredictable as it was perilous, and it was a path that would test not only his resolve, but the very foundations of everything he had ever believed in. Later that same night, as the rain pattered against the tall, narrow windows of the study, Alexander Iverson sat alone in a dim pool of lamplight. His mind churned with questions that now had no simple answers. The quiet hum of the ancient clock on the mantel marked time in steady, indifferent beats, each tick echoing the unspoken promise of an inevitable confrontation with the truth. He knew that his carefully constructed world, a realm of calculated transactions and controlled relationships, was now being imperiled by an enigma that defied his every expectation. Unable to quell the tempest of uncertainty, Alexander reached for his telephone. His fingers hesitated over the smooth surface of the device, as if aware that this call might alter the course of his meticulously ordered existence. After a moment's pause, he dialed the number of his most trusted aide, Boris, a private detective renowned for his discretion and effectiveness. Boris had served the Iverson family for years, navigating the labyrinthine corridors of corporate espionage and personal intrigue with equal aplomb. Tonight, Alexander needed him more than ever. "Boris," Alexander began in a measured tone that belied the storm inside him, "I require your assistance with a matter of utmost sensitivity." There was no need for embellishment. Boris had long been accustomed to the unadorned language of business and secrets. "I need you to investigate the Moreau family, especially any details surrounding Catherine's past. There are elements about her that seem incompatible with the polished image she presents to the world." On the other end of the line, Boris's voice was low and deliberate. "Understood, Alexander. I will gather everything I can. Expect a report as soon as I have something concrete." The conversation was curt and professional, but it carried the weight of a deepening mystery that neither of them could ignore. For the next few days, Alexander found himself haunted by subtle yet persistent signs that something was amiss. In the quiet intervals between his demanding meetings and high-stakes negotiations, his thoughts drifted back to Catherine. The soft, sad cadence of her voice, the mysterious glimmer in her eyes, and the unspoken sorrow that seemed to trail her like a shadow. Her behavior during the reception, the fleeting moments of vulnerability he had glimpsed when she thought herself unobserved, all began to coalesce into a narrative that contradicted the placid exterior she maintained. Late one evening, as Alexander sat in the solitude of his expansive library, an architectural marvel of dark wood shelves filled with rare volumes and illuminated by the warm glow of vintage reading lamps, he found himself drawn to a particular section of the room. There, hidden away behind rows of meticulously organized texts on finance and strategy, was a modest collection of books on art, literature, and even folklore. It was an unexpected corner of his estate, a place where the rigor of business gave way to the creative, the emotional, and the inexplicable. Alexander had never taken the time to explore these volumes, yet tonight they seemed to beckon him as a silent repository of truths that might shed light on the perplexing woman he had married. Flipping through a worn copy of a classic tragedy, he began to see parallels between the lamentable heroes of old and the modern figures who had once held the reins of power in his world. There was something achingly familiar in the tales of passion, betrayal, and the inexorable pull of fate. Stories that resonated with the silent struggle he felt deep within himself. As he read, he wondered if Catherine's quiet demeanor and the cryptic half-smiles she offered were not signs of indifference, but rather the carefully guarded responses of a soul scarred by loss and hardened by experience. In her eyes, he now saw not the vacant gaze of a pawn in a strategic game, but the haunted look of someone who had lived through storms that no one in his gilded world could imagine. Meanwhile, Boris's investigation was moving forward with the precision of a finely tuned instrument. Alexander received periodic updates via secure messages that painted a picture of a past obscured by carefully curated public narratives. Catherine's family, it turned out, was steeped in an obscure blend of wealth and tragedy. The Moreau lineage, once heralded as purveyors of refined culture and social grace, had been marred by personal misfortunes and whispered scandals that had been swept under the rug by influential benefactors. Among the murky details that Boris had unearthed was the story of Catherine's younger sister, a vibrant soul whose untimely death had been shrouded in mystery. The whispers alluded to a betrayal that had not only claimed her life, but also cast a long, indelible shadow over the family legacy. The revelations left Alexander grappling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was a stark sense of betrayal at the thought of a concealed past, a hidden history that had not been shared with him before their union. On the other hand, there was an undeniable empathy, a dawning understanding that behind every seemingly impenetrable facade lay a series of scars, each a testament to battles fought in silence. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he allowed himself to wonder if his own heart, so long governed by reason and pragmatism, might be capable of compassion, of the kind of connection that transcended mere business interests. In the ensuing days, the mansion that had once been the epicenter of cold, calculated dealings took on a new, almost eerie quality. Catherine moved through the halls with an almost spectral grace, her presence both magnetic and elusive. At times, Alexander observed her from afar, a solitary figure by a window, the soft lamplight catching the delicate contours of her face. Or as she strolled through the expansive gardens at dawn, her silhouette framed by the gentle hues of a breaking day. In these moments, he perceived a fragility that belied the stoic exterior she so diligently maintained. One afternoon, as the heavy summer heat gave way to a rare, cool breeze, Alexander found himself in the garden, standing beneath an ancient oak that had witnessed the passage of countless seasons. The garden, a carefully curated blend of natural beauty and engineered perfection, seemed to mirror the duality of his own life, a harmonious yet contrived blend of nature and nurture, chaos and control. And it was here, amidst the rustling leaves and the distant murmur of a fountain, that Catherine appeared once more. She was seated on a weathered stone bench, her gaze fixed on the horizon as if searching for answers in the interplay of light and shadow. "Alexander," she said softly, her voice carrying a timbre that was both inviting and inscrutable. The single word spoken in a moment of unguarded intimacy sent a ripple through his carefully held composure. He approached her slowly as though afraid that too rapid a movement might shatter the fragile peace that seemed to envelop them. "Sitting here alone, contemplating the mysteries of the day?" he asked, his tone light yet laden with a sincerity that was unusual for him. Catherine turned her head slightly, and for a moment her eyes met his, a silent acknowledgement of a shared, unspoken understanding. "Sometimes," she replied, "one must step away from the demands of the world to simply be, to listen, to feel, and perhaps to remember that even in the midst of our carefully constructed lives, there exists a realm of truth that cannot be captured by contracts or ledgers." Her words resonated with Alexander, stirring within him emotions he had long tried to suppress. It was as if she had unlocked a door to a part of him that had remained dormant, a part that yearned for connection, for the raw honesty of lived experience. Yet even as these feelings emerged, the spectre of uncertainty lingered. The truth of Catherine's past, the silent echoes of pain and loss, loomed over every interaction, casting long shadows on the present. Over the course of the next several days, Alexander's internal conflict deepened. He found himself oscillating between a desire to confront Catherine and a reluctant need to respect the boundaries she had so meticulously set. In private moments, as he pored over documents and old photographs in his study, he began to piece together the fragments of a history that had been obscured by time and deliberate silence. There were hints of a turbulent childhood, moments of rebellion against a legacy that valued wealth above all else, and the unmistakable imprint of a tragedy that had left an indelible mark on Catherine's soul. In one such instance, Alexander discovered an old letter hidden between the pages of a dusty ledger, a letter written in a delicate flowing script that spoke of loss, of dreams deferred, and of the inexorable pull of fate. The contents of the letter were cryptic yet profoundly moving, hinting at a painful secret that had shaped Catherine's very identity. The realization that the woman he had married carried within her a lifetime of unspoken sorrows stirred something deep within him, a longing to know her fully, to embrace both the light and the darkness that defined her. Yet as Alexander delved deeper into the mystery, he was acutely aware of the delicate balance he risked upsetting. To pry too forcefully might not only unravel the tenuous bond that was beginning to form between them, but also expose wounds that had yet to fully heal. The spectre of betrayal, of secrets held too long in the silence of family honor, weighed heavily on his conscience. But in that inner turmoil, he recognized a truth that he had long evaded: the possibility that love, in its most genuine form, was not a transaction to be measured or controlled, but a journey of discovery, a quest that demanded both courage and vulnerability. That evening, as twilight surrendered to the deep indigo of night, Alexander retired once more to his study. The room, illuminated only by the soft glow of a solitary desk lamp, felt simultaneously familiar and alien. With a measured resolve, he opened his laptop and began to draft a series of notes, an internal record of his thoughts, observations, and the burgeoning questions that now defined his existence. He wrote of Catherine's quiet strength, the haunting beauty of her melancholy, and the unspoken promise that somewhere within her lay the key to unlocking not only her past, but perhaps his own hidden depths. As he typed, his fingers moved with a hesitant grace, as though the act of writing itself were a confession of sorts, a surrender to the uncertainties that had long been buried beneath layers of ambition and control. Each word was a step closer to a truth that had eluded him for so long, a truth that was as elusive as the shifting shadows on the walls of his ancient study. In that quiet, solitary moment, Alexander Iverson made a silent vow to unravel the mystery of Catherine's past, to confront the secrets that lay hidden in the depths of her soul, and in doing so to rediscover a part of himself that had been lost in the relentless pursuit of power and profit. It was a journey that promised to be as perilous as it was transformative. A journey into the heart of a mystery that was as old as time itself, and as profound as the unyielding passage of the human spirit. As the rain continued to fall softly outside, mingling with the steady rhythm of his thoughts, Alexander closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. The night was far from over, and the future remained an uncharted expanse of possibilities. Yet in that small, solitary space, amidst the quiet echoes of an ancient clock and the faint, persistent hum of a secret yearning, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. In the days following that quiet, fateful night in his study, Alexander Iverson found himself caught in a relentless tide of questions and half-formed revelations. The weight of the hidden letter, a silent witness to Catherine's long-buried sorrows, pressed upon him with an intensity he had not anticipated. Every polished surface of his sprawling estate, every echo in the long corridors seemed to murmur fragments of a past that he was only just beginning to comprehend. The letter, with its delicate script and ambiguous references to a life marred by tragedy, had awakened something within him that both terrified and intrigued him. It was as if the carefully cultivated walls around his heart were beginning to crack, letting in the light of truth and the chill of vulnerability. Morning arrived with a somber haze that mirrored the tumult within him. The estate, usually a symbol of his dominance and control, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets and whispered regrets. As he moved through the grand foyer, Alexander's mind replayed the vivid images of Catherine's solemn eyes and the almost imperceptible tremor in her voice as she mentioned the name Maria. That name resonated like a distant bell in his thoughts, carrying with it the echoes of sorrow and loss that had so unexpectedly shattered the facade of the woman he had thought he knew. Determined to pursue this mystery, he resolved to tread carefully, a measured approach that balanced his natural inclination for control with a newfound empathy that began to emerge in the wake of Catherine's quiet revelations. Late that afternoon, while the sun struggled to break through the persistent veil of clouds, Alexander found himself wandering the expansive corridors of his private library once again. The atmosphere was heavy with the scent of old leather and paper, a comforting reminder of the past, yet now a setting that seemed to harbor more than just memories of intellectual pursuits. Amidst the rows of ancient tomes, his eyes fell upon a collection of journals and diaries belonging to former members of the Iverson family. Although he had always considered these relics as little more than historical curiosities, today they took on a new significance. Perhaps buried among the carefully preserved accounts of business triumphs and family triumphs was a record that could shed light on Catherine's mysterious lineage and the legacy of pain that haunted her. Alexander's fingers trembled slightly as he leafed through one of the leather-bound volumes. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded yet still potent with the emotion of past confessions. Here, in the quiet solitude of the library, he allowed himself a moment of introspection. Each line of handwritten text was a portal to lives lived with passion, regret, and the unyielding hope of redemption. The juxtaposition of such raw humanity against the cold calculus of his daily dealings stirred a dissonance in him that he could no longer ignore. He wondered if perhaps his own relentless pursuit of success had come at the expense of something far more valuable, a connection to the genuine, unfiltered pulse of life. While Alexander searched for clues in the silent annals of his family history, Catherine's days unfolded in a parallel rhythm, a quiet, deliberate dance with memories that were as painful as they were indelible. In the private sanctum of her boudoir, away from the prying eyes of the household, she would often retreat to a window overlooking the meticulously manicured gardens. Here, in the soft, waning light of dusk, she allowed herself to be enveloped by the memories of a life that had been both a source of exquisite beauty and unbearable anguish. The letter, its words echoing the loss of her beloved Maria and the cruelty of a past that had once threatened to crush her spirit, remained folded neatly in a hidden compartment of a jewelry box, a silent reminder of battles fought in isolation. There, with trembling hands, she would trace the delicate curves of the ornate letters, as if trying to capture a solace that always seemed just out of reach. Unbeknownst to Alexander, these private moments were unfolding concurrently. Catherine's internal world was a tapestry of contradictions, a delicate balance of guarded strength and unspoken grief. Her eyes, when they met his in fleeting, unguarded instants, revealed an ocean of memories that she had long strived to keep hidden. Each meeting, Every tentative conversation in the gilded halls of their shared home carried the potential to either bridge the gap between them or widen the chasm of misunderstanding. And so, every word exchanged was laden with both the promise of revelation and the risk of exposing wounds that had yet to fully heal. As Alexander delved deeper into the journals of his ancestors, he began to notice patterns that seemed to mirror the very essence of Catherine's concealed past. There were accounts of family alliances forged in secrecy, of deals sealed with the knowledge that not every truth was meant to be spoken aloud. The Iverson legacy, so often touted as a paragon of calculated success, was interwoven with narratives of personal sacrifice and hidden heartache. In a way, the similarities between the two families, his own and Catherine's, began to emerge like twin threads in a vast tapestry, each colored by the scars of battles fought on both public and private fronts. Late one evening, while the mansion was hushed by the arrival of night and the rhythmic patter of rain against the windows, Alexander summoned Boris once again. Seated in his office, the detective's face was lined with the weariness of countless cases solved and mysteries uncovered. Yet tonight, there was a seriousness in his gaze that mirrored the gravity of the subject at hand. Alexander recounted the fragments he had gathered from the old journals and shared his growing suspicion that the Iverson and Moreau legacies were bound by more than a mere business merger. They were entwined by histories of loss, betrayal, and a yearning for redemption that defied the sterile language of contracts. "Boris," Alexander said, his voice low and measured, "I need you to look into the historical records of both families to find any references to a Maria, any indication of the tragedies that have been carefully erased from our public histories. I suspect that there is a hidden story, one that has been deliberately obscured, and it may hold the key to understanding Catherine's reticence and her guarded soul." Boris nodded, the weight of his task evident in the set of his jaw. "I understand, Alexander. I'll start by accessing archived records from the local historical societies and any family documents that might have been overlooked. It won't be easy to untangle decades of carefully buried secrets, but I'll get to the bottom of it." That conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter in Alexander's quest for truth, a quest that would lead him down corridors of history through dusty archives and into the murky depths of family lore. Every new piece of information added a layer of complexity to the enigma that was Catherine Moreau. With each passing day, he felt the grip of certainty loosening, replaced by the realization that the woman he had married was not merely a partner in a strategic alliance, but a living repository of stories that defied simple explanation. In the midst of these revelations, Alexander found himself grappling with a growing internal conflict. The meticulous logic that had long governed his life now battled against the emerging emotions that he could neither quantify nor contain. His professional acumen, honed over years of negotiating high-stakes deals and outmaneuvering rivals, seemed woefully inadequate to navigate the labyrinth of human emotion that Catherine's presence evoked. There were nights when he would lie awake, the silence of his opulent bedroom punctuated by the ceaseless whisper of memories and the soft sigh of regret. In those moments, the realization struck him with disarming clarity. The pursuit of power and wealth had perhaps come at the cost of understanding the delicate intricacies of the human heart. Catherine, for her part, appeared to sense the slow but inexorable shift in Alexander's demeanor. In brief, unguarded exchanges, a soft smile here, a lingering glance there, she acknowledged the change, even if she chose not to voice it explicitly. It was as though, in her silent way, she was inviting him to join her on a journey into the hidden recesses of her past, a journey that would reveal not only the secrets of her lineage, but also the scars that life had etched onto her soul. Yet even as the possibility of such intimacy loomed before them, both remained cautious. aware that some truths were as fragile as they were dangerous. One rainy afternoon, while the mansion's ornate halls were shrouded in a subdued twilight, Alexander found himself standing before a large, dust-covered portrait in a secluded gallery. The painting depicted a striking woman from a bygone era, her eyes imbued with a sorrow that resonated deeply within him. It was a portrait of a woman whose features bore an uncanny resemblance to Catherine's own, and for a moment he allowed his mind to wander. Who was this woman? Could she have been an ancestor? Perhaps one whose life had been as tumultuous and fraught with forbidden secrets as the one Catherine now embodied. The thought stirred within him a profound curiosity, a longing to connect the dots between the past and the present, between the legacy of the Iversons and the mysteries of the Moreaus. In that quiet gallery, with the rain providing a somber accompaniment to his reflections, Alexander's resolve hardened. He would not allow the shadows of the past to continue to dictate the terms of their future. He was determined to confront the mysteries head-on, to peel away the layers of deception and silence until he uncovered the raw truth at their core. And as he stood there, the soft glow of a single spotlight illuminating the delicate brushstrokes of the portrait, he felt a stirring of hope, a cautious optimism that perhaps, through understanding the pain that lay hidden beneath Catherine's serene exterior, he might finally come to know the real her. Thus began the next phase of his investigation, a delicate interplay of inquiry and introspection, of probing the dark recesses of history while safeguarding the fragile bond that was slowly forming between him and Catherine. Each step forward was imbued with the risk of unearthing revelations that could shatter the delicate balance between them. Yet Alexander pressed on with a fervor born of both professional rigor and a newfound unspoken longing to heal the wounds of the past. As night once again enveloped the mansion, and the rain continued its ceaseless refrain against the stained glass windows, Alexander retired to his study with a mind buzzing with possibilities. His thoughts raced with visions of long-forgotten diaries, faded photographs, and whispered conversations from a time when honor and shame danced a precarious waltz. He realized that the journey to understanding Catherine was not merely a personal quest. It was a journey into the very heart of what it meant to be human, to embrace both the beauty and the brutality of a life marked by loss and love. In that moment, as the steady rhythm of the rain lulled him into a tentative calm, Alexander vowed to pursue every lead, to scrutinize every scrap of evidence, until the truth of Catherine's past lay bare before him. He knew that the path ahead was fraught with peril and uncertainty, but for the first time in his life, he was ready to confront those shadows, not as obstacles to be overcome, but as integral parts of the story that had brought them both to this crossroads. And so, with a resolve as solid as the ancient stone walls that encased his world, Alexander Iverson embarked on a journey that would test the limits of his intellect, challenge the boundaries of his heart, and ultimately reveal that some mysteries, once unearthed, have the power to transform even the most impervious of souls. In the final days of that fateful summer, the Iverson mansion found itself bathed in the soft golden hues of an autumn afternoon, a stark contrast to the turbulent nights that had so long defined its corridors. Alexander Iverson, once the embodiment of cold calculation and rigid control, now moved through the grand halls with a measured grace that spoke of battles fought within the depths of his soul. The journey he had embarked upon in pursuit of Catherine's elusive past had led him through a labyrinth of hidden histories, whispered scandals, and fragments of a legacy that had been obscured by time. Yet as the leaves began their slow descent outside, marking the passage of seasons, Alexander sensed that the final truths were now within his grasp. That morning, the estate was unusually quiet. The storm that had raged through the previous nights had given way to a stillness that was almost reverent. Alexander awoke before dawn, driven by a compulsion he no longer could dismiss, a need to confront the ultimate mystery that had consumed his thoughts for weeks. With deliberate steps, he made his way to the old study, a sanctum of memories and secrets, where he had first discovered the delicate letter and the faded journals that hinted at a past both tragic and transformative. Tonight, however, he was not alone. Across the manor, Catherine moved silently through the halls. The radiant light of the breaking day revealed a woman transformed, not merely by the revelations of her own haunted history, but by the steady, unyielding compassion that Alexander had shown in his quest for truth. Her eyes, once guarded and impenetrable, now carried a quiet resignation mingled with a hint of hope. Every whispered word, every tear that had escaped in the solitude of her private moments, had led her to a place where she was finally ready to share her story. When the two met in the venerable library, a vast chamber lined with centuries-old tomes and bathed in the soft glow of early morning, a palpable silence fell between them. The air was charged with an unspoken understanding, as though the very walls of the estate had borne witness to the unfolding of destinies interwoven over generations. Alexander looked into Catherine's eyes, searching for traces of the woman he had come to cherish, and saw there not only the reflection of his own internal transformation, but the echoes of a past fraught with sorrow and unfulfilled longing. "Catherine," he began, his voice trembling with a mixture of determination and vulnerability that was new to him. "We have spent these long, arduous days chasing shadows, seeking to understand the secrets that have bound our families and defined our lives. I have uncovered stories of betrayal, of loss, and of a promise that was broken so long ago. But what I have learned is that no matter how deep the scars, they are not meant to be hidden forever." Her gaze, steady and unyielding, met his with a glimmer of tentative relief. "I have lived in silence for so long, Alexander," she whispered, "burdened by memories of a life that never gave me a choice. I built my walls so high, not only to protect myself, but to hide from the pain of a past I could neither change nor forget." She paused, letting the words settle in the quiet expanse of the room. "And yet, in you I have found someone who does not fear the truth, even if it burns. You have dared to look beyond the facade, to see the person who stands before you in all her fragility and strength." In that moment, the dam of unspoken emotion broke. Alexander stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently clasp hers, a gesture that bridged the gulf between two souls once separated by circumstance and the relentless pursuit of power. "Catherine, I cannot promise that the path ahead will be free of pain or regret," he murmured. "But I vow to stand by you as we face these truths together. I want to help mend the fractures that have haunted you, and in doing so, mend the parts of myself I never knew were broken." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she squeezed his hand in quiet acknowledgement. "The scars we bear," she said softly, "are the maps of our survival. They tell the story of how we were forged in the crucible of hardship and how we emerged, if not unscathed, then undeniably alive." As she spoke, the silent weight of decades of hidden sorrow seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile yet resolute hope for renewal. Outside, the first rays of sunlight spilled over the horizon, bathing the estate in a gentle, forgiving light. In the garden beyond, where the autumn leaves danced to the rhythm of a soft breeze, the world appeared to breathe a collective sigh of relief, as if nature itself was acknowledging that transformation had begun. It was in this quiet interlude, amidst the gentle murmur of the awakening day, that Alexander and Catherine began to reconstruct the narrative of their intertwined lives. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion gradually took on an air of renewal. The halls that had once echoed with the sound of isolation now resounded with tentative laughter and the soft cadence of shared conversation. Alexander dedicated himself to not only uncovering the final chapters of Catherine's past, but also to rebuilding the future they would write together. His meticulous records, once cold and impersonal, now featured annotations filled with empathy and understanding. And as the investigation that had once been a mission of control evolved into a journey of mutual healing, both he and Catherine discovered that some of the deepest wounds could only begin to mend when faced with truth and compassion. One crisp autumn evening, as the family gathered in the ornate dining room for a quiet meal, Alexander took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. The conversation was no longer dominated by the sterile language of business or the rigid protocols of high society. Instead, there was an openness, a willingness to share even the smallest details of their inner lives. A dinner not merely of sumptuous food, but of stories and laughter that resonated with the warmth of human connection. After the meal, under a starlit sky, Alexander and Catherine found themselves walking side by side along the garden's winding path. The garden, a living tapestry of memory and hope, bore witness to their evolving journey. There, in the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant call of night birds, they spoke in hushed tones of dreams deferred and of new beginnings. Catherine recounted fragments of her past that had long been locked away. Stories of a childhood marked by both love and betrayal, of moments when hope had flickered like a candle in the dark. In turn, Alexander shared confessions of a man who had once prized logic above all else, but had come to understand that the truest power lay in embracing the messy, beautiful reality of being human. In those shared moments of vulnerability, the once insurmountable walls between them began to crumble completely. The secrets of the past, once seen as ominous burdens, transformed into the very bonds that united their hearts. It was as though the mansion itself, with its ancient stones and echoing corridors, had become a living chronicle of redemption, a testament to the idea that even the deepest scars can give rise to something unexpectedly tender. As autumn yielded to winter, the transformation in their lives became undeniable. The investigative reports and hidden records, once the focus of Alexander's relentless pursuit, now served as symbols of lessons learned rather than sources of animosity. In uncovering Catherine's secret history, he had not only dismantled the illusion of a perfect, unassailable persona, but had also embraced the profound imperfections that made her so irresistibly real. And in doing so, he found a sense of liberation, a release from the constraints of a life that had valued calculation over compassion, profit over personal truth. On a quiet morning beneath a sky dusted with the soft blush of dawn, Alexander and Catherine sat together in the library. The room, once a silent witness to solitary introspection, now resonated with the sound of a shared heartbeat. They read, side by side, their fingers occasionally brushing as if to reaffirm the connection that had taken root amidst the chaos of revelations and the tumult of change. In that timeless space, words became unnecessary. Every glance, every touch, spoke volumes of a journey completed and of a future being written anew. It was in this profound silence that Alexander finally understood that the path to true strength was not found in the suppression of emotion or the relentless pursuit of control, but in the courage to confront one's own vulnerabilities and to embrace the beauty of the imperfect. Catherine, too, discovered that the power to heal lay in sharing the burdens of the past, in allowing another soul to carry a part of the sorrow, thereby lightening the weight of a lifetime's pain. Their story, woven from threads of mystery, pain, and eventual understanding, had reached its final cadence, yet its echoes promised to reverberate into the future. As they closed the heavy leather-bound volume of their shared history and looked toward the horizon, the mansion and its sprawling grounds seemed to pulse with a new vitality. A quiet, resolute determination had replaced the old rigidity. A sense of unity had supplanted isolation. And though the memories of past losses would forever linger in the quiet recesses of their hearts, they now knew that love, fragile, defiant, and transformative, was the one truth that could bind them together against the ravages of time. In that final, tender moment, beneath the vast expanse of a winter sky gradually giving way to the promise of spring, Alexander and Catherine embraced. No grand declarations were needed. No orchestrated ceremony marked the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Their silent union, born of shared scars and newfound hope, was a quiet testament to the idea that the greatest triumphs are often found in the willingness to let down one's guard and to allow another to see the soul beneath the armor. And as the first gentle snow of the season began to fall, covering the world in a soft, forgiving blanket of white, it seemed as though even nature was offering its benediction, a promise that every ending was but a prelude to a new beginning.